The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. It was as if the sky itself mourned Daniel Whitaker, a man too kind for the world that took him too soon. Inside the grand Whitaker estate, heavy footsteps echoed off marble floors as black umbrellas gathered. By the door, wet and forgotten, chandeliers flickered against the storm's wind, casting restless shadows across the long dining table, now covered with untouched food. At the head of the table sat Margaret Whitaker, the grieving widow. But no one called her that anymore, not in this house. Margaret's face was pale beneath her black veil. She hadn't cried, not once, not even during the burial. She simply sat still, watching the family who had never truly accepted her whisper behind napkins and crystal glasses, waiting for the right moment. Daniel's mother, Evelyn, raised a glass of wine. "To my son, may his soul find peace." Her voice cracked. Deliberately, Margaret thought. Everything Evelyn did was for an audience. To Daniel, they echoed. Margaret didn't raise her glass. She kept her hands in her lap, her fingers laced tightly together like she was holding something in, something dangerous. She felt it already, the change. When Daniel died, something inside her broke, but something else had awoken. Evelyn stood and walked to her. "Margaret, dear," she said, her voice honeyed and false. "It's time we discussed the future." The entire room fell silent. Margaret looked up slowly. Her eyes, beneath the veil, were dry and dark, reflecting none of the chandelier's light. "What future?" she asked. "The estate, the family name. You know Daniel had no children, and this house, it belongs to the Whitakers. It always has." Margaret blinked. "I was his wife." "A wife who was never truly accepted," Evelyn replied coldly. "You married in secret, no prenup, no blood ties. You came from nothing, and now—" "I came from love," Margaret said, standing. She was taller than most remembered, taller or perhaps simply more present. "I stayed by him through his illness. I bathed him, I watched him fade. And you, Evelyn, you stayed in Europe until the end." "You were never part of this family," Evelyn spat. "You were tolerated for his sake. That word. Tolerated." Margaret looked around at the gathered family. No one met her eyes. Not Daniel's brothers, not his cousins, not even his uncle who once called her daughter. They all turned their faces away, full of empty wine and guiltless inheritance. The rain battered the windows harder now. "You're asking me to leave," Margaret said, though it wasn't a question. "You have 1 week," Evelyn replied. "Take what's yours, whatever, little that may be." Something shifted in the room then, an invisible weight. The chandelier above them flickered again, but more violently. Several glasses shattered without being touched. Margaret tilted, her head slightly, just once, and smiled. But it wasn't a grieving smile. It was something else entirely. Evelyn flinched. "I see," Margaret whispered. She turned and walked away, black veil trailing behind her like spilled ink. Her heels clicked with unnatural sharpness, louder than thunder, and as she passed the tall mirror in the hallway, she didn't cast a reflection. She didn't sleep that night. Margaret sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the box Daniel had left her. No key, no lock, just a simple wooden box with carvings, in an ancient language she didn't understand. He gave it to her the night before he died. There's something in my family, a gift or a curse. Daniel had murmured, his breath shallow. If they hurt you after I'm gone, if they take what's yours, this will protect you, but only if you truly want it. At the time, she hadn't understood. Now she did. She placed the box on the floor in front of her and whispered, "I want it." The carvings on the box glowed faintly and the lid cracked open. Inside was a small black stone, smooth and warm to the touch. As soon as her fingers closed around it, Margaret felt something slide into her. A presence, an ancient memory, something that had slept beneath her skin, waiting for this very moment. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She welcomed it. Her eyes rolled back, then forward again, glossy, black, and endless. By morning, Margaret was gone. At least that's what the maid told Evelyn when she came knocking. "Her room's empty," the girl said. "Her things are gone. She didn't say goodbye." Evelyn didn't care. "Good riddance," she muttered. She was more concerned with the cold that had suddenly settled over the house. The fireplace wouldn't light. The thermostat blinked erratically. Even the chandeliers, which had hung undisturbed for decades, began to sway slightly on their own. Whispers echoed at night, coming from places no one stood. The mirrors warped, and reflections appeared delayed, sometimes moving after the person had already left the frame. At first they blamed the storm. Power fluctuations, old wiring. But then came the footsteps, in the attic, in the halls, in rooms that should have been locked, and always, always at 3:03 a.m. Evelyn woke one night to find muddy footprints leading down the hallway, small, bare, and wet. They stopped at her door. She locked it after that, but every night, the 8th doctor would be open by morning. 3 days after Margaret left, Daniel's youngest brother, Victor, was found in the garden, dead. His body was twisted, mouth open in a silent scream. His eyes were black, completely unnaturally black. The doctor said it was a stroke, sudden, tragic, but Evelyn knew better. Victor had laughed when Margaret was told to leave. Evelyn remembered that clearly. Now he was the first to die. The staff began quitting one by one. Some said they saw a figure in the halls at night, a tall woman in black with no face. Others claimed to hear Daniel's voice, begging, warning. Evelyn refused to leave. "This is my house," she declared. "Let the dead stay dead." But they didn't. On the 5th night, Evelyn stood alone in the dining hall, the same place they'd gathered for the funeral. The table was empty now. The family had left, all but her. She stared at the chair where Margaret once sat, veiled and quiet. Lightning cracked outside, and for a second Evelyn saw her again, sitting there, unmoving, hands in her lap, veil covering her face. She blinked. The chair was empty. She poured herself another drink. "You were never one of us," she muttered. A soft voice replied from the shadows. "Neither were you." Evelyn dropped her glass. It shattered. The room grew colder. She turned slowly, and there stood Margaret. But she wasn't veiled anymore. Her face was pale, beautiful, and lifeless, and her eyes were pools of midnight. Evelyn tried to speak, but her throat seized. Margaret stepped forward. "You kicked me out of a house I helped build. You spat on my grief. You stole what was never yours." She raised a hand, and Evelyn dropped to her knees, gasping. "Daniel loved me, and he gave me a gift. Not wealth, not land, something far more eternal." The house groaned around them. Pictures fell from the walls. Lights shattered, shadows moved. "You should have let me grieve," Margaret said softly. "But now I'll teach you how." She reached out and Evelyn screamed. Then everything went black. The Whitaker estate stood tall beneath the storm-slashed sky, its grandeur now hollow and trembling. What once held memories of wealth and legacy now echoed with secrets, soaked in grief and something darker still. After Evelyn's death, the official reports were vague. Cardiac arrest, they said, sudden trauma. But the paramedics whispered about her final expression. Mouth wide open, eyes burst in their sockets, hands curled as though clawing at something invisible. Her body had been found collapsed in the hallway outside Daniel's old study. The same room Margaret once spent her days in. The same room now locked and ice cold, even in the heart of summer. The remaining family didn't return after the funeral. Only one person stayed behind, Richard Whitaker, Daniel's cousin. A skeptic, a man of facts and finance who didn't believe in ghosts or vengeful spirits. To him, Margaret had always been a manipulator, a clever social climber. "She poisoned Evelyn with grief," he told the board of trustees. "She's probably hiding somewhere with our money." But even Richard felt something wrong the moment he stepped into the estate again. The air was heavier, thicker, like the house was breathing. He walked through the long corridors with a flashlight. Though electricity had been restored, the light fixtures in certain parts of the mansion refused to work. They would flicker violently as though warning him back. "Just old wires," he mumbled, though his voice lacked conviction. In the library, he found one of Margaret's journals, tucked between ancient medical texts and Daniel's family records. He flipped it open, scoffing at the elegant handwriting and the faint scent of lavender. But his smirk faded as he read. May 12th. They think I'm weak, that I clung to Daniel for status, but I loved him. They never saw the nights I held him when the pain wouldn't let him sleep. They didn't hear what he confessed near the end. There's something buried beneath this house, not stone, not wood, blood, secrets too old to name. The Whitakers made a pact centuries ago, and Daniel feared it was waking again. He told me if they turned against me, I would need to protect myself, not with the law, but with what lies beneath. The box is not a curse, it is a door. Richard slammed the journal shut, chest tight. He didn't believe in any of it. But he remembered Daniel, too, how the once vibrant man had wasted away so quickly, whispering strange things in his sleep. How he often stared at corners like something waited just out of view. Maybe the box was real. Maybe Margaret had opened something she shouldn't have. That night, Richard awoke to knocking. Slow. Heavy. From behind the bedroom wall. He sat, up, heart racing. The room was freezing. "Old plumbing," he whispered, though his breath puffed in the air like smoke. He tried to ignore it, but the knocking returned. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more, like a code, a pattern. He got up and pressed his ear to the wall. It was warm. He stepped back instinctively, and the mirror above the dresser shattered, spraying glass like confetti. In its place, where the reflection should have been, was a shape. A tall woman in black, veil lifted, eyes bottomless. She didn't move, just stared. He screamed and fell backward, but when he looked again, she was gone. Only the cracked frame remained. The next morning, Richard called a priest. Father Brennan had been with the Whitakers for decades, a quiet man always on the fringe of the family's events, tolerated more than welcomed. "I need a cleansing," Richard said. "The house, something's wrong." Father Brennan didn't seem surprised. "I warned Daniel years ago," the priest said. "There are things buried here that were never meant to rise again." "What things?" The priest hesitated. "You should ask about your great-grandfather, Theodore Whitaker." Richard frowned. "He built this house." "He unearthed something before that," Brennan whispered. "In the mines beneath the hill. They said he struck silver. But what he found was older, something that bled black instead of red." Richard scoffed, but it felt hollow. "Daniel told Margaret everything," Brennan added, "and she awakened it." The priest blessed the house anyway, chanting through the halls, sprinkling holy water. But as he entered Daniel's old study, the lights exploded overhead. The air turned rancid. Something growled from the shadows. Father Brennan dropped his cross and ran. He never returned. Richard couldn't sleep after that. He returned to the journal, searching for answers. He found more entries, darker ones. May 14. The box grows colder the more I touch it. I dreamed of Daniel last night, but his face was sewn shut. He pointed to the basement, to the cracks in the floor. Something is beneath. It's waiting. It knows I'm listening now, and it wants revenge. I won't stop it. They will pay, one by one. Richard shoved the book aside. "I'm not afraid of shadows," he growled. But as he turned to leave the study, he froze. The box was on the table. He hadn't put it there. He hadn't even seen it before. Wooden, carved, ancient, just sitting there, waiting. His fingers hovered over it. "Don't touch it," his mind screamed. But something else, stronger, urged him on. He opened it. Inside was the stone, still black, still warm. The moment he touched it, he felt his ears ring. The walls pulsed, the shadows lengthened. He gasped and stumbled back, eyes flickering. For a split second, the room was gone, replaced by a vision. A well deep underground, filled, not with water, but with writhing bodies whispering in a tongue too old for words. Above them stood Theodore Whitaker, chanting, bleeding from his eyes, smiling as something rose from the pit. Then Margaret, standing at the edge, arms open. She had become the gate. The stone burned in Richard's hand, and he screamed, flinging it across the room. The box snapped shut on its own. Over the next days, Richard changed. He stopped shaving. His hands trembled. He spoke to himself in whispers he didn't understand. He found teeth in the sink, black veins under his skin. Every time he blinked, he saw her, Margaret, watching from the corners, her eyes like two collapsing stars. He tried to leave the estate. The gates wouldn't open. The phones failed. The car died, trapped. And always, every night at 3:03 a.m., the footsteps came. Down the hall, up the stairs, to his door. One night he opened it before they could knock, and found the family portrait outside, burned, except for Margaret's face, which was perfectly intact, though she had never been in that painting. And her eyes, even there, were black. The final entry Richard ever made was found scrawled on the wall in his own blood. The well is open. She is not alone. The house remembers everything. When authorities arrived weeks later, they found the estate completely abandoned. Richard was gone. No signs of struggle, no signs of departure. Just a cold house, empty. Except for one mirror, uncleaned, there were still whispers in town about the Whitaker woman. Even after the estate was shut down and Richard vanished without a trace, locals swore they saw Margaret on the edge of the woods at dusk, wearing the same black funeral dress, her veil fluttering, eyes like inkwells that swallowed the light. Some said she came back to collect the debt owed to her. Others claimed she had never left at all. But only one person dared step foot back into the house after Richard's disappearance. Anna, Whitaker, Daniel's niece, the only one who'd ever shown Margaret a shred of kindness. Anna had been living abroad when Daniel died. She only learned of everything after the media firestorm, headlines splashed with words like mansion madness, family vanishes, and wife's eyes turned black after funeral. It sounded like tabloid nonsense, until she read Margaret's journal entries, which the authorities had catalogued and returned to the Whitaker family archive. Anna wasn't supposed to have access, but curiosity had always been her weakness. She read every line, every word dripping with grief, betrayal, and something else, power. There was no doubt in Anna's mind that Margaret had loved Daniel fiercely, desperately. But what disturbed her more was the unshakable feeling that Margaret was right about something. Something had infected the house long before Margaret, something ancient, buried deep, and if no one stopped it, it would rise again. Anna returned to the Whitaker estate on the first day of fall. The gates had rusted in place. The garden had overgrown into something wild, thorny, and untamed. Crows circled the chimneys in unsettling spirals, cawing low like warnings. But the house welcomed her. The door, once swollen shut, creaked open with ease. Inside the air was cold, still, not musty, not stale, almost expectant. Anna moved through the halls with a lantern, avoiding the light switches. Richard's journal, found in his ransacked room, warned her that the electricity triggered them. He didn't explain who they were, but Anna hid her suspicions. She made her way to the study. The box was gone. Only a dark stain on the desk remained, shaped like a handprint pressed too long into the wood. She ran her fingers over it and shivered. It was warm. She turned to leave and stopped. In the corner stood a tall mirror, one that hadn't been there before. The glass rippled, and Margaret appeared within it. But this wasn't the delicate woman Anna remembered. This Margaret was taller, spine stiff like iron, dressed in widow's lace that fluttered without wind. Her face was pale, almost transparent, and her eyes, black as a pit and weeping smoke, locked onto Anna's. "Why did you come back?" the reflection whispered. "I needed to understand," Anna said softly. "What happened to you?" "You left me," Margaret said. "Just like the rest of them. They thought I was nothing but a shadow. Now I am." Anna stepped closer. "Did you open it? The box?" Margaret didn't answer. She only smiled. And then the mirror shattered inward, like it had been sucked into itself. Anna stumbled back as icy wind exploded from the glass, scattering papers, toppling books. When it all settled, the mirror was gone. Just a clean wall remained, as if it had never been there. That night, Anna dreamed of the well. The same vision Richard described, except now she was standing beside Margaret. The pit churned with black smoke and whispers. But this time, something climbed out. It looked like a child at first, pale, thin, but its mouth was too wide, its eyes too deep. As it rose, dozens more hands reached for the edge. Anna woke up screaming. The smell of earth and rot clung to her hair. The next morning she went to the basement. The door had been nailed shut, but the nails were old. The boards gave way with just a few kicks. The air inside was damp and sour. She descended slowly, lantern swaying, revealing old stone walls covered in forgotten family sigils and Latin phrases scratched out with jagged marks. At the far end, beneath a tattered white sheet, she found a trap door. She pulled it open. A ladder led into darkness. Every bone in her body screamed to run. But Margaret's voice echoed in her mind. "If they turned against me, you would need to protect yourself, not with the law, but with what lies beneath." Anna climbed down. The ladder ended in a cavern, not carved by human hands, but grown. Roots curled like ribs across the ceiling. Strange symbols pulsed faintly on the walls. In the center of the chamber was a stone well, ringed in ash. The same well from the visions. Anna approached slowly. Inside, there was no water, only the stone, the same one Margaret wrote about. It floated inches above the bottom, spinning. Silently, Anna reached toward it, but froze. A voice murmured behind her. "I waited for you." Margaret. Only this time she wasn't in a mirror. She stood at the edge of the chamber, as real as Anna. But changed. Her dress trailed into shadow. Her skin cracked like old porcelain. And her eyes, those endless black wells, swallowed everything. "You're not Margaret," Anna whispered. "I was," the thing said, "before they made me choose." "Choose what?" Margaret stepped forward. "To be forgotten, or to become something they could never ignore again." "I want to help you." "Then finish what I started." She gestured to the stone. "But Anna hesitated. In that moment she saw flashes. Richard screaming in the study. Evelyn's mouth frozen in a final gasp. Daniel in bed, whispering about secrets under the floorboards. Margaret touching the stone, her eyes turning black, and Anna realized this wasn't revenge. It was a summoning. The Whitakers had fed this thing generations ago, and now Margaret had become its voice. "I can't let you bring it back," Anna said. "You already have," Margaret whispered. The shadows in the chamber trembled. Something massive stirred in the pit. Anna turned and ran, climbing the ladder, slamming the trapdoor shut. She ran to the library, searching for the box, the journals, anything. And there, on the desk, the box was waiting. It opened on its own. Inside was the stone, but this time it was cracked, and from the crack leaked not light, but something black and alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. She slammed it shut. Too late. All around her, the house screamed. The walls bled. The floor buckled. In the mirror above the fireplace, dozens of Margaret's faces stared back, each one different, each one darker, some smiling, some screaming, all watching. Anna ran, out of the house, down the garden path. But at the gate she stopped, because standing there was Daniel, or what looked like him. Pale, hollow, his eyes stitched shut. He opened his mouth, and Margaret's voice came out. "You can't run from the house, Anna. Not when it remembers." The gates closed behind her with a clang. She was trapped, and deep inside the front door refused to open. Anna pounded on it with her fists, screamed into the night, kicked at the hinges, but it was like trying to break through bone. The house was alive now, and it had decided she was never leaving. She staggered back from the door, breath fogging in the cold, stale air. Shadows pulsed at the edges of the hall. The chandelier above her groaned on its chain, like something was climbing it. She knew Margaret wasn't done. And if Anna didn't unravel this, curse, she'd become just another Whitaker swallowed by its teeth. She fled to the upstairs corridor, heart pounding. Every portrait on the wall turned to face her. The once proud faces of the Whitaker line now stared with empty sockets and slack jaws, paint peeling around their mouths like they were mid-scream. Anna paused in front of one particular painting, the oldest in the collection, a man with a stern face, tall hat, and black gloves. The plaque read, Lord Ellison Whitaker, 1761, but someone had scratched out the rest of the engraving with a blade. Beneath the portrait, faintly visible in the lamplight, were the words, "He made the pact. The rest of us paid for it." Anna's skin crawled. She took a step back, then felt the cold press of fingers against her shoulder. She spun around. No one was there, but the whispers had started again. Anna, daughter of betrayal. Touch the stone and see. She ran to the attic. If there was anything left, any trace of Margaret's original self, it would be up there, where she had spent most of her last days in grief and isolation. The door groaned as she opened it, revealing a long, narrow staircase that twisted like a spine. At the top, the room was filled with dust-covered furniture, old trunks, and yellowed lace curtains that barely clung to the windows. she spotted a rocking chair by the window. It was moving, slow, back and forth, creaking, like someone had just left it. On the floor beside it, Margaret's final journal. Anna knelt down, brushing away cobwebs, and flipped through the brittle pages. The entries had changed. They were no longer about grief or family betrayal. They were warnings. The house is alive, not haunted, alive. Its roots are deep, older than we know. We built on sacred ground, and they never forgave us for it. Ellison made the first offering, a blood pact, in exchange for fortune, power, and silence. But pacts rot. Now it feeds on us whether we offer or not. I thought the stone would save me. I was wrong. It made me part of the house. If someone pure finds the stone, they can seal it again. Only one chance. Only before the house chooses its next heir. Don't let the house name you, Anna. Anna's hands trembled. She looked around, but the attic was still. And then the floor beneath her breathed. A long, slow inhale of dust and wood. The room groaned and tilted as though the very walls were shifting. The floor split just a few inches apart, and roots, pale and snake-like, pushed up between the cracks. She jumped back, but the rocking chair flung itself toward her, crashing against the wall. A voice echoed through the rafters. Too late, Anna, it's already begun. The house was choosing. The heir. Anna fled down the stairs, gasping, mind spinning. There had to be a way to reverse this, to cut off the source before it consumed her. She needed to destroy the stone. She needed to get back to the well. But as she descended, she realized with mounting horror, the house had changed its layout. Doors no longer led where they were supposed to. Hallways stretched on infinitely, or looped back to the same point. Windows showed nothing but endless night. She passed a mirror and saw herself standing still in it, even as she moved past. The reflection smiled, and its eyes were turning black. Finally, after what felt like hours of running in circles, she found the basement door again. The boards had resealed themselves with thick black resin like tree sap hardened into bone. She hacked at them with a broken chair leg until they gave way. The tsi. Air beyond was thick. Breathing it felt like swallowing sorrow. She descended the stairs. The stone walls were slick with sweat, whispering in tongues she didn't understand. And at the end, just like before, the trap door. Only now it was open. Something had climbed out. Anna gripped the lantern and descended the ladder, one shaking, rung at a time. The chamber below was no longer empty. It had grown. The walls now pulsed with black veins, like blood vessels feeding into the stone well at the center. The stone itself no longer hovered. It writhed in place like it was alive, veins of black energy crawling over its cracked surface. And next to it, Margaret. Or what was left of her. Her body was more shadow than skin now, hair floating as if underwater, eyes bottomless and wide, leaking black tears that hissed as they hit the floor. "You came," she whispered. "You wanted me to destroy it, Anna said. I read your journal. No, Margaret said, voice hollow. I wanted you to understand. There's no destroying it. There has to be. Anna, Margaret said, stepping forward. You're the last Whittaker untouched by greed or guilt. That's why the house wants you. You're the perfect vessel. Anna stepped back. I'm not part of this. You were the moment. You stepped through the door. Suddenly the chamber shook. The roots from the ceiling dropped down, lashing across the floor, pulling the stone upward into the air like an offering. Anna screamed, shielding her face as black wind blasted through the chamber. In the swirling chaos, she saw visions. Ellison Whittaker standing over a bloody altar, chanting, children buried beneath floorboards. The stone whispering promises of power to each generation. Margaret, crying beside Daniel's grave, alone, cursed. And then Anna herself. With black eyes. No, she whispered. I won't become this. She lunged forward and grabbed the stone with both hands. It burned, searing through her skin, into her bones deeper than pain. But she held on, and for a moment, just one, she felt everything. The house, its hunger, its memory, its loneliness. It didn't want heirs. It didn't want revenge. It wanted to be seen. It had been forgotten, buried, misunderstood, abused by centuries of Whittakers who only took. Anna fell to her knees. Let me end this, she whispered. Let me bury it for good. The house stilled. When she opened her eyes, the chamber was empty. No stone, no Margaret, just silence. The roots retracted. The walls stopped pulsing. The lantern flickered back to life. And Anna climbed out of the basement into the dawn light. The front door was open. The path was clear. She walked out barefoot, shaking, and didn't look back until she reached the edge of the garden. The house stood still, silent, windows dark. And in the upstairs window, Margaret smiled one last time, then faded. Anna didn't speak for days. She wandered through the nearest town barefoot, dazed, covered in dirt and dried blood. Locals tried to help, to offer her food or blankets, but she could barely process their kindness. The house was gone. Not physically. It still stood on that hill, as old and crumbling as ever. But something had shifted. The feeling that it was watching, breathing, alive, that was gone. The roots had quieted. The whispers had ceased. But something still lingered. Inside her. After weeks of recovery, Anna returned to the house, not to live in it, but to understand it. She wasn't foolish enough to believe the darkness had been destroyed. She had stopped it, sealed it, but not without cost. Each night, her dreams were filled with pulsing stone, bleeding walls, and black eyes watching from behind glass. She had thought Margaret's pain ended the night she disappeared. But the deeper truth was far more terrible. Margaret had never truly left, and neither had the house's hunger. Anna began to piece together the Whittaker lineage with newfound clarity. Margaret was never the villain the town whispered about. She was its final victim. The pact Ellison Whittaker had made had started a cycle, one that required heirs, sacrifices, and silence. The stone was a tether to something ancient, something beneath the land long before the house was built, a power that didn't care about human morality, just blood and legacy. The journals, the paintings, the cryptic messages hidden in the walls, Anna gathered them all into one room, the library. She locked the door behind her, sealing herself inside with the truth. The final entry in Margaret's journal still haunted her. If the house names you, the only escape is surrender or solitude. And if you're reading this, I'm sorry, Anna. It's already chosen you. That night, Anna stared at her reflection in the mirror for hours. She touched her eyes. They were still brown, still hers, but they felt like they didn't belong. And then, just before dawn, she blinked, and in that fleeting second, she saw it. Black, like oil, like ink in water, like Margaret's eyes. Anna ran, left the house, left the hill, left the town. She vanished off the map, cutting ties with the Whitaker name entirely. She bought a cabin in the woods 2 states over, disconnected from the internet, changed her name. Anything to stay unknown, anything to keep the house from finding her again. But evil doesn't forget, and legacies don't die easily. It started small, rocks in her sink, perfectly round, like from a well. A voice whispering her name in the dead of night. A knock on the cabin door, no one there, but a muddy footprint on the porch. And her dreams. Oh, God, the dreams! They grew louder, longer, clearer. Dreams of being underground, of cold roots wrapping around her spine, of a voice deeper than thought murmuring, "You carry it now. The pact is you." One night, she woke to find her hands covered in black resin, the same that had sealed the basement door back at the Whitaker house. She hadn't touched anything like it, hadn't left the cabin in weeks. It was forming inside her. She tried to fight it, burned the Whitaker journals, poured salt in every corner of the cabin, slept with holy symbols under her pillow, chanted every prayer she could remember. But the house didn't need wood and nails anymore. It lived in her blood. She began to write, not just to cope, but because the stories wrote themselves. Pages upon pages. Tales of cursed houses, pacts made in blood, women kicked out after funerals whose eyes turned black. She wasn't even aware of her own hand moving. Her notebook filled faster than she could stop it, and every time she tried to burn a story, the flames would flicker, then go out. Anna understood the truth. She hadn't escaped. She was the vessel now, the final heir. The house didn't want to kill her. It wanted her to spread it, to carry its memory, its pain, its hunger into the world. And she did, not by choice, by instinct. The stories kept flowing, and with them, the curse traveled. A local librarian found one of Anna's discarded stories in a donation bin. He read it that night, alone. The next morning he was found wandering the cemetery, muttering about roots in his lungs. A child picked up one of Anna's old notebooks at a garage sale. She began sleepwalking, digging holes in the backyard. Her parents thought it was a phase until she drew the stone perfectly in black crayon. The stories were a virus, and Anna was patient zero. Years passed. She stopped running. There was nowhere left to run. The Alms house had taken root inside her mind. She returned one last time. to the Whitaker estate. The town had long since boarded it up, declared it condemned. But Anna broke in through the cellar window. Inside, everything was exactly as she left it. The dust, the silence, the well. She descended the basement ladder, now worn with time. The stone wasn't hovering anymore, was embedded in the floor like a beating heart, thudding softly beneath the dirt. She knelt beside it, placed a hand on its surface, and said, "I see you." The house shuddered, not violently, just a sigh, like an old monster finally exhaling after centuries of waiting. Anna's eyes turned black, not violently, not with horror, but peacefully, like her reflection had simply caught up with her. She whispered one final line. "Let the story end here." And the stone cracked, silently, finally. Outside, the house began to rot, not burn, not collapse, but wither. The wood turned gray, the windows melted like wax, the roof sagged and caved in, not with rage, but with relief, as if the land itself had been waiting for Anna to accept her fate. They found her body weeks later, in the basement, eyes closed, a faint smile on her face. The stone was gone, and so was the curse, or so they believed, until someone found a notebook, stuffed between the floorboards. Its first page read, "They kicked her out after his funeral." Then her eyes turned black, and beneath it, a hand-drawn sketch of the Whitaker house. Still standing, still waiting. She wandered through the nearest town barefoot, dazed, covered in dirt and dried blood. Locals tried to help, to offer her food or blankets, but she could barely process their kindness. The house was gone, not physically. It still stood on that hill, as old and crumbling as ever. But something had shifted. The feeling that it was watching, breathing, alive, that was gone. The roots had quieted, the whispers had ceased, but something still lingered. Inside her. After weeks of recovery, Anna returned to the house, not to live in it, but to understand it. She wasn't foolish enough to believe the darkness had been destroyed. She had stopped it, sealed it, but not without cost. Each night, her dreams were filled with pulsing stone, bleeding walls, and black eyes watching from behind glass. She had thought Margaret's pain ended the night she disappeared, but the deeper truth was far more terrible. Margaret had never truly left, and neither had the house's hunger. Anna began to piece together the Whitaker lineage with newfound clarity. Margaret was never the villain the town whispered about. She was its final victim. The pact Ellison Whitaker had made had started a cycle, one that required heirs, sacrifices, and silence. The stone was a tether to something ancient, something beneath the land long before the house was built. A power that didn't care about human morality, just blood and legacy. The journals, the paintings, the cryptic messages hidden in the walls, Anna gathered them all into one room. Tway,